Hello everybody, Crow here, and this is a response to Marlinlee's Now That I Think About It tag. And basically what this tag is it's really for, I guess, people with older game systems and who, I guess, grew up playing those and had a choice in selecting which systems they had. And now that they're, older and they have all the systems now, like for example, I grew up with an Atari 2600, but I also now have like an Odyssey 2, an Intellivision, and a ColecoVision. Do I feel like I got the best, system at the time? Or did I miss out by not having an Intellivision and such? That's the question, and I'm going to kind of go through this generation by generation. And like I said, I'll just start with the Atari 2600. Now, back at the time, I didn't purchase that, but it's just what my family had at the time. And in fact, a lot of people I knew had Atari 2600. There was only one person I knew that had the Intellivision. That was my grandparents, and my cousin had the ColecoVision. And even at the time, I didn't regret having the Atari 2600. I would play the Intellivision, and I would play the ColecoVision. And I noticed how nice the graphics were on the ColecoVision, but you know what? And also on the Intellivision, had slightly different. In my book, the ColecoVision was better than the Intellivision, but I still, to this day, I have all the systems now. I've played them all. I still prefer the 2600 over those, and it's just because of the games. I mean, and not only that, but some of my favorite games on the Atari 2600 were paddle controlled. And you don't have paddles on either the ColecoVision or the Intellivision. I'm leaving the Odyssey 2 out of that because I didn't even know about this system's existence until much later. But even then, I would still prefer the 2600. I'm not going to go through every single system in each generation just because there are so many. Let's move on. Next generation, let's say the NES. I had an NES growing up. That's what we wanted. We got it eventually. I'm just looking at GameFAQs where they have these different generations, and I said the main systems in the third generation: NES, Commodore 64, Sega Master System, MSX, which doesn't even apply here, as does the ZX81. I'm gonna admit the Commodore 64 and the any computers, because I had a Commodore 64. But you know what? The Master System was not even. I didn't even see that until after the Live System and toy stores were trying to get rid of the Master System. So yeah, I mean, well, there's also the 7800, which doesn't have major as a major player there. But so yeah, we got the NES versus the Master System versus the 7800. I had the NES, and again, I don't regret that. I still think. For me, at least, that was the best of the bunch. He had the most selection of games. Master System technically was a little bit better, but still, I'd prefer to go back to those games on the NES. The 7800, again, that was just there's some good games on the 7800. It's just the selection of games you got on the NES. So again, I don't regret not having the NES growing up. Next generation, again. We wanted the Super Nintendo. It looks like Turbo Graphics 16 is lumped into that generation, even though it came out far before the Super Nintendo. The Super Nintendo Genesis, Turbo Graphics 16. Let's just say those. Neo Geo's in there, but there's no way I was going to afford a Neo Geo. Yeah, wanted a Super Nintendo, and even when the Genesis was out, yeah, I kind of wanted a Genesis. To replace the Nintendo, but it wasn't, because my cousin had one and we were playing Sonic on it. That was a great game and everything. But when the Super Nintendo came out, I really didn't want a Genesis at all. Since then, and not really since then, but growing up, I was glad I had a Super Nintendo and not a Genesis. Again, you had the Mario games and everything, and what cracked me up was that you have the Genesis commercials that was kind of trying to put the Super Nintendo games in a bad light, but to me it just couldn't do it. I mean, you had commercials that were showing Sonic the Hedgehog versus Super Mario World, and I still would rather play Super Mario World watching that commercial. So yeah, did get a Genesis later, as well as TurboGrafx 16. At the time, I'm glad I went with the Super Nintendo, but really like this TurboGrafx 16, and there's great games on the Genesis as well. But still, I preferred the Super Nintendo. That's just me. I know a lot of people prefer the Genesis over the Super Nintendo, but you know what? I grew up with the Super Nintendo. I've got also the one that I like even more than the Genesis is the TurboGrafx 16. That to me is a step above the Genesis. I don't even know why. I can't even explain it. But yeah, moving on then. Next generation. This was the first generation where I actually had to go out and I had a choice, go out and buy my own system. We got the PlayStation, Nintendo 64, and the Saturn. Those are the three main ones. There's also the 3DO, but again, that was way up there. There's no way I was going to buy that one price-wise. I went with the PlayStation. Do not regret that at all. Saturn actually came out a little bit before that for a price, and I knew somebody that had a Saturn. He was bragging all about how he had a Saturn, and we'd play Virtua Fighter on it. And then I got the PlayStation, and about a year later, he got a PlayStation. I was like, hey, what happened? I thought you had a Saturn. He was like, shh, don't tell anybody I have a Saturn. He was actually embarrassed to have a Saturn back then. And partly it's probably due to the game selection that we got. A lot of Japanese titles not coming out over here. And as for the Nintendo 64, I actually bought one off my friend at the time for a really cheap price. I played Mario Kart on it, played Super Mario 64 on it at the time, and then I just gave it to my dad. I was not interested in the Nintendo 64 in the least. I was always playing the PlayStation more than that. And even today, I would prefer PlayStation games over the Nintendo 64 games, as well as the Saturn games. So don't feel like I really missed out there, especially since I did have the opportunity to play those systems back in the day too. 3DO was the one that I didn't play until I actually bought it a couple years ago, and you know what, I didn't really miss out. And let's go with the last generation here, because I'm not going to do the current generation. PS2, GameCube, or Xbox, or Dreamcast. We'll just go with those four here. After having the PlayStation, I was all hyped up about the PlayStation 2, completely ignored the Dreamcast. Yeah, really, I didn't know about, well, I knew about the Dreamcast. I didn't really play one until after I had the PlayStation 2, and the Dreamcast was already dying. So yeah, I still prefer the PlayStation 2 over the Dreamcast, although it's barely. There are some really, really good games on the Dreamcast, and I'm glad I have one of those today. I mean, that's pretty much the closest one we have so far. Also, there's the GameCube and the Xbox. With the not having an Xbox and having one now, I really didn't miss much. Almost all the titles that were on the Xbox were on the PlayStation 2, and there were even more titles on the PlayStation 2. So, didn't miss much there. With the GameCube, I actually ran out and bought one a couple of years after I had the PlayStation 2, just because of Smash Brothers Brawl. Me and my friends used to get together every Friday night and play games, and one of the games we happened to play a lot was Smash Brothers Brawl, and I got addicted to that game. So as soon as I got a job out of college, my first paycheck was running down and buying a GameCube and Smash Brothers Brawl. And but yeah, I still prefer the PS2 over the GameCube. I mean, just because of the titles. I mean, and the controller I think was more comfortable than either of those, any of those systems really. You had the PlayStation 2 basically having the same controller, and I got so used to that. It was such a comfortable controller that it just kind of felt uncomfortable playing with anything else. So yeah, I hope I didn't really ramble on too much. I see I'm almost up at 10 minutes on this video. So we'll just leave it at that. Really say that, no, I really don't think I missed out on game consoles I didn't buy, but then got later. I mean, it's fun to play those games that I never had a chance to play, but at the times I made those decisions, I felt I made the right decisions. Well, at least for me. There's some people who are saying, right now, it's like, how could you want a Super Nintendo over a Genesis? The Genesis was a better machine, but for me, the games I like to play, it was the Super Nintendo. And also the same thing with the PS2. Why didn't you buy a Dreamcast? Well, I was in college at the time. Didn't really have any much money. So I was either going to, I didn't have money to buy a Dreamcast and a PlayStation 2. So I bought a PlayStation 2. Actually had one reserved at GameStop, and I had it all paid off with trade-ins at the time. And then some. So, yeah, when that came out, I picked that up, and I was playing that nonstop. So, yeah, I mean, for my, I'm glad I have a chance to play all these systems, and if given the opportunity, I'd recommend everybody, anybody play all these systems just to see what they were all like. But at the time, I, just don't think I'm happy with the decisions I've made regarding game systems. So, thanks for watching. See you all next time. Thanks for Marlinlee doing this tag, and I'll see you all next time. I know I said that already, but bye. Bye!
By this time in a James Bond movie, there'd have been 10 helicopter explosions, 8 ski chases.
This spy movie's just kind of hanging around the house.